listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us spend some time with you. I am being carefully monitored and supervised.
Yes, he is. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
We been a busy week around here. It's getting to be springtime. If you're a gardener, you plant anything outside, you are probably getting excited, especially if you live in the northern hemisphere. We're coming up on planting season. Some people are getting ready for flowers. Some people are getting ready for tomatoes and sweet corn, that kind of thing. So it's all good. And along with that, Passover's coming up very quickly too. So there's that. If you like the things you hear, we'd appreciate it if you hit those share buttons, because if you like it, chances are your friends and family will, and your enemies certainly need to hear it too. So check that out. Check out GiveGod90.com if you haven't recently. Author Jerry Mitchell's where the books are sold. I'm getting tongue-tied tonight already. It's too early for that. Anyway, advertisements are done. As I said, Passover is quickly approaching, and the more I was thinking about it, it's observed much differently today than in the past. So I thought it would be interesting to look at how Passover's changed, but at the same time, the reasons for it remain the same. The first Passover is actually recorded in Exodus chapter 12. Something that some people overlook has become a slight misinterpretation, and for others it's become something that they really have come to believe, but that's okay. We'll correct that in a moment. But before we do that, let's look at some of the things the children of Abraham were instructed to do, if you'd like to read that.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt. This month will be the first month of the year for you. Both of you are to tell the whole community of Israel. On the 10th day of this month, each man must get one lamb. It is for the people in his house. There may not be enough people in his house to eat a whole lamb. Then he must share it with the closest neighbor. There must be enough lamb for everyone to eat. The lamb must be 1-year-old male. It must have nothing wrong with it. This animal can be either a young sheep or a young goat. Keep the animal with you to take care of it until the 14th day of the month. On that day, all the people of the community of Israel will kill these animals. They will do this as soon as the sun goes down. The people must take some of the blood. They must put it on the sides and tops of their door frames. These are the door frames of the houses where they will eat the lambs. On this night, they must roast the lamb over fire. Then they must eat it with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the lamb raw or boiled in water. Roast the whole lamb over a fire with its head, legs, and inner organs. You must not leave any of it until morning. If any of it is left over until morning, you must burn it with fire. This is the way you must eat it. You must be fully dressed as if you were going on a trip. You must have your sandals on, and you must have your walking sticks in your hand. You must eat it in a hurry. This is the Lord's Passover. Exodus chapter 12, verse
1 through 11, I believe. Sorry. Now, this wasn't designed to be something cumbersome. It wasn't designed to be burdensome. It was something that they were familiar with, something that they could do, something that they probably did as often as they had lamb, right? What it was actually designed for is an exercise in faithfulness. Now, the people who were living in Egypt, they had witnessed the plagues and how after the third plague, the Israelites were not affected by them. So some of these people, they kind of looked around at the Israelites and said, you know what? It might not be a bad idea. I don't know exactly what these folks got going on, but maybe we better be on their side. So that's the reason when the people came out of Egypt, they were considered a mixed multitude. The people who joined with the Israelites had watched as their God had protected them. And these folks wanted to accept that protection as well, because they had really learned it's probably better to have some respect and some fear for the God of Abraham. It is possible, that they were aware something big was getting ready to happen, right? You don't go through this series of things without something big going on at the end. Now, what a lot of people was overlooking is actually in the next verse. And we often think of the angel of death. Some people have come to call it the death angel, as going through the land to kill the firstborn of anyone who did not choose to participate in choosing a lamb, putting the blood on the doorposts of the homes. But let's look at how it really reads. On that night, I will pass through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn male, both man and beast. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord, is how it reads in most English translations. Did you catch it, though? On that night, I will pass through the land. And when you read it in the original Hebrew at the very end, I am Yehovah. That's how that verse ends. So it is not the angel of death or the death angel or whatever you want to call it. It was indeed the Almighty himself who came down to strike fear in the hearts of the Egyptians. Think about that. It was the Almighty himself who came down. Now, it was our Creator who passed through the land looking for the sign of the blood on the doors of the faithful. This was really, really important. It was actually too important to allow any other of the divine beings to accomplish. Okay? Today we call them angels. But it was just too important to let somebody else do this. The Almighty was going to do it himself. Right? He says, I will do this. And of course, the Creator passed through the land, killed the firstborn male of every household, the firstborn son, right? The firstborn male of every animal that the Egyptians had, if you did not put the blood on the door. And yes, he could tell the difference. And when this was done, the Egyptians were only too happy to allow the Israelites to leave with, just get out of here. Take whatever you want. What I have is yours, just leave. Right? Of course, that didn't last very long. Pharaoh had a change of heart and went after him, and that did not end well for Pharaoh either. So that's the purpose of Passover. It's an exercise in faithfulness. The second Passover is interesting, though. It is recorded in Numbers chapter 9, if you'd like to read that.
The Lord spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai. This was in the first month of the second year after the Israelites left Egypt. He said, "Tell the Israelites to celebrate the Passover at the appointed time. That appointed time is the 14th day of this month. They should celebrate it at twilight. They must obey all the rules about it." So Moses told the Israelites to celebrate the Passover, and so they did. It was in the desert of Sinai at twilight. This was on the 14th day of the first month. The Israelites did everything just as the Lord commanded Moses. Numbers chapter 9, verses 1 through 5.
All right. So the second Passover was observed very much like the first. The lamb would be brought into the home on the 10th day. It's not really a sacrifice. They simply killed the lamb on the 14th day as the sun was going down. They would put it in their ovens or over the fire, and then they would eat and remember what happened a year ago. It's that simple. Now, Deuteronomy makes it clear that sacrifices for sin are not to be done any place other than the tabernacle, or it would later be extended to the temple. However, that did not include the Passover lamb. It's different. It's not a sin sacrifice. It's a sign of faithfulness. Deuteronomy 16, beginning in verse 5, you're not to sacrifice the Passover animal in any of the towns that the Lord your God is giving you. You must only offer the Passover sacrifice at the place the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Do this in the evening as the sun sets, at the same time you departed from Egypt. And you shall roast it and eat it in the place the Lord your God will choose. And in the morning you shall return to your tents. Now this indicates the Passover lambs are to be killed in Jerusalem, right? But not necessarily at the temple. Because, you can't kill it at the temple and eat it at the temple. If you remember, Josephus records that the year Yeshua Jesus was crucified, there were over 250,000 lambs killed in Jerusalem that year. You don't kill that many lambs for about 1 million people and have a great big barbecue. It's done. It was to be done in Jerusalem, but the people were to gather and do it themselves. That changed with the beginning of the Second Temple in Ezra 6:19 and 20. On the 14th day of the month, the exiles kept the Passover. All the priests and Levites had purified themselves and were ceremonial clean. And the Levites slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the exiles, for their priestly brothers and for themselves. Now, from all of the history that I have the ability to research on this, and there's quite a bit of it, this is when all of the Passover lambs began to be killed at the temple instead of in the homes. Is it convenient to do it that way? I don't know. The priest would kill the lambs, and then they would give it back to the family, and they would take it and cook it and eat it, as near as I can read from all of the history books. Is it exactly according to the instructions of Moses? No. Is it close? Yeah, kind of. Why'd they do it that way? Probably because the first year they came back from being exiled, it was a celebration, plain and simple. But that celebration turned into tradition. So that's why they did it that way from then on. The completion of the Passover meal actually begins the week of unleavened bread. Now, today we consider the entire week to be Passover, partially from misunderstanding, partially from tradition. You know how that kind of goes, right? The farther we are from creation, the dumber we are. We don't do things the way we were intended to do them. And, of course, Passover itself has changed. Today, very few people would even consider killing their own lamb. And then we have the introduction of the Seder that has replaced the original instructions of Moses. Now, the Seder was actually introduced sometime around the destruction of the Second Temple. So, for all the Christians out there, it would have been impossible for Yeshua, for Jesus, his disciples, or anyone else to have joined in a Seder meal for Passover that year. It just was not going to happen. Plain and simple. And realistically, the Seder itself has changed. different components were included over the years. And in my opinion, for what it's worth, this was done primarily to offer the people observing Passover the same traditions. They wanted to feel like they were inclusive in this event. They wanted to feel like they were doing it together all the same way. You know how that is, right? You don't want to, if you're supposed to be doing something together all in one place and you can't be in that one place, well, then the next best thing is for everybody to do it alike. and that's probably the primary reason Hillel and some others added things and said, you know what, this will help bring people together and give them that sense of oneness. Now, also today, there are Jewish observers who don't include the lamb because, well, Passover can't truly be kept the way it was during the times in the temple. It kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? If you can't do something properly, in their opinion, then we'll find a different way to do it. I'm quite certain that Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't allowed to observe Passover the way they should have, but they did the best they could in the situation they were in. Daniel was pleasantly rewarded for that. There are Messianic observers, both Jewish and Christian, who include Yeshua, Jesus, as part of the Seder as well, because he is considered the perfect Lamb of God, in their opinion. Now, the big question, should Christians observe Passover? Absolutely. And it's not because you want to be Jewish, because you think that you're observing the Last Supper of Jesus and the disciples, because Passover is not really a Jewish feast, right? And I've gone over this in the past often, and I can't say some of these things enough, because I keep getting questions about some things, and people are still confused about some things. So let's go back to Leviticus 23, verses 1 and 2, and it reads, "Then the Lord, Jehovah, said to Moses, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, These are my appointed feasts. The feasts of Jehovah you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies." He doesn't say that, these are going to be Jewish feasts. The Creator tells Moses they belong to him, the Almighty himself. They're his. They're his appointed times that he chooses to meet with us. And we meet with him, and hopefully we can remember and learn the original meanings of these appointed times. The writer of Hebrews tells us there are shadow pictures or unclear pictures of good things to come. And the feasts are what is being referred to there. Rejecting these feasts because they have come to be considered Jewish is nothing less than foolish. It comes from very poor theology. It comes from bad interpretation. I know some people out there are going, well, the oracles of God were entrusted to the Jews. And that's true. The words of God were given to them for protection. He didn't relinquish ownership of anything. Don't forget that. He still owns these. They're his. Also, don't forget, Moses wasn't Jewish. He was not from the tribe of Judah. He was from the tribe of Levi. If you look in Exodus chapter 2, now a man from the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got him a papyrus basket, coated it with tar and pitch. She placed the child in the basket, set it among the reeds along the banks of the Nile. His name was Moses. And in this particular translation, it's a little wrong. She saw the child was perfect. Moses was the perfect male child. There's a lot of lessons to go with that, but I won't get into them right now. When we think about Moses being Levite, he could trace his lineage back to Levi, the son of Jacob. Today, we kind of lump them all together and we call them all Jews, but not all of the people who practice Judaism are from the tribe of Judah. Some can trace their lineage back to the Levites, some to Benjamin, some to one of the others. And it gets a little hairy because, the northern tribes split off and they went their separate ways. But remember, they will all return at some point. And they will no longer be considered Jewish. They will be considered Hebrew once again. It's that simple. So, really, there's no way we should ever consider any of the feasts outlined in Leviticus 23 strictly Jewish. They're Hebraic in origin. Well, they're practiced by Hebrews originally, but they belong to the Creator. And I would encourage anyone who hears this, observe Passover and the week of unleavened bread. It's outlined, actually all the feasts outlined in Leviticus 23. You're not going to be able to do everything that it says you should do. But if you take the time to read and understand and study these things out, and I hate to keep saying this, but don't just watch a couple of YouTube videos. Actually look into it, dig into it for yourself and see what it says. Because even in English, most of the time, it's going to be very, very, very close. Okay? And you're not going to do this because you want to be like the Jews of today. Hopefully you're going to do this because you have a desire to know your Creator better and live the way you're designed to live, the way He designed you to live. Because He didn't design you to reject Him or His ways. He designed you to follow His instructions and to be part of His family. You can invite Him into your house and He might even come in and sit down and eat with you, as long as you're not eating something He doesn't like, right? I don't know if He likes chocolate cake or not, but there are things we know He doesn't. But as long as you're doing the best you can with what you have, the information you have, that in itself is an act of faithfulness, and you will be rewarded for that. Hopefully you've learned something today, and we will see you on Thursday.
On Thursday.
Until then, many, many blessings, everyone.
Absolutely.